on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. You're watching the most objective magic review channel here on YouTube. Today I've got a top 5 magic review for you. It's been about 2 months since I've done one of these top 5 magic reviews. This is where I take a magic plot or idea, dissect it, and give you guys 5 versions or variations that I like best of that plot. And today we're taking a look at Max Maven's Positive Negative. Now, Max Maven is probably a name that you're well familiar with, as he was a very famous mentalist magician who just recently passed away in November, unfortunately, at the age of 71 from brain cancer. He had been claimed as one of the top 100 most influential magicians of all time, and he has literally created thousands of magic effects over his lifetime. If you're not familiar with him, you may want to check out my magician review I did of him, where I went over my favorite top 10 effects of Max Maven there. You can check that out. So this is a tribute to Max Maven, and I really wanted to just go over this routine of his, Positive Negative, as it has influenced so many of us over the years. I'm going to be giving you guys my top 5 favorite versions of this effect. So let's start out with just some brief history of the effect, and then we'll get into the list. So this started out back in 1978. Larry Becker came up with an invisible coins routine that he published in 1981 in his book called Mentalism for Magicians, and that was called Heads or Tails. In that effect, he would present like a large envelope that had a prediction inside. He would have a spectator flip a coin, imagine flipping a coin, and then they would tell them if it landed heads up or tails up, and then they can open the envelope and see that he predicted ahead of time how it would land. That was the basic effect. Very simple, rudimentary, and if you look in the book, the envelope is huge. Not something you would probably want to perform today, although you never know, right? So it wasn't until 1994 that Max Maven introduced his version, which kind of utilized part of that idea, except he took it another step forward, and he published that in Syzygy Volume 1. I think it was even like page 6 or 7. It was right in the beginning of the magazine. And Max's version used a business card. So he would write something down on the business card, put it on the table, and he would tell the spectator to imagine 5 coins in front of them. They would go through a simple process where they would choose a coin, and then he would have them imagine them flipping it in the air. And they would ask him how would it land. And then he could show them immediately that not only did he predict ahead of time what coin would be ultimately chosen, but how the coin would land as well. Now, that version of the effect, Positive Negative, the version, the original, right, is still totally workable today. The critique that it received was that the mentalist could only give away the card half of the time. Now, as you're going to see, there is a version I'm going to be going over which will allow you to perform the effect exactly as is and still give away the card. It is interesting to note that somewhere along the way, magicians decided to narrow the choices of coins from 5 to 3, because all versions really that were published or came out after the fact all used just 3 imaginary coins. And I think that's just to make the verbal choice or the verbal control easier, right? Because this is using, Max Maven's favorite technique, otherwise known as equivoke. And so, people today, I guess they just look for the easier way out. 3 coins is easier than 5, I guess. That's what it comes down to. Now, I'm going to go over a couple of notable mentions, and then we're going to go over the top 5 list. All of these effects are all like 10 years old or older. None of this stuff is new, okay? And it doesn't matter, because all this stuff that's old is still just as good today as it was when it came out. All of this stuff comes from magic books, magic magazines mostly, and then a couple of standalone like PDFs that you can pick up as well. So virtually none of this stuff comes from video. Although it is interesting to note that Positive Negative really didn't become really well known until after Max Maven put it out on his Video Mind DVD, which I think that was in 2001. So you get an idea of how old the effect is that we're talking about here. So let's start with a couple of notable mentions, and these are notable mentions because they're either really similar to positive negative, or they're just not as good as the ones that I chose for my top 5 list. All right, so the first effect comes from Magigram magazine. It was April 1978 issue, and this was called Control Coins. You can find it in there. I'll actually leave here exactly like where you can find it. But this effect, it's not exactly positive negative, but it kind of feels like it. And the reason why I'm using this as a notable mention is because I've used this effect as an impromptu mentalism coin effect so frequently that I thought I would just mention it here because I think you guys are going to absolutely love it. The way that it looks is like this, is that you approach somebody that you ask them if you say, do you have a good sense of imagination? They may say yes or no. You tell them, imagine I have 3 coins in my hand, and you can name your 3 coins. Then you can tell them that you're gonna, you want them to choose a coin. They're gonna name a coin. Like, let's say for instance, they name a quarter, and then you can say, you have a really good sense of imagination because check this out. That's exactly what I have in my hand. You can show them immediately that you have the coin in your hand that they merely just thought of. Now, you're not flipping the coin or anything. That's really the whole effect, is just they think they're gonna choose a coin and it's in your hand, basically. It's extremely clever because it is kind of a multiple out effect, but the spectator will never ever be aware of that. Now, the original version from Magigram is awesome. It's really easy to perform. I've never had any issues with it, and you can pick that up for $3 from library.com, which is hilarious. Definitely worth the $3 because you're going to use it constantly. But for those people that want to check out something that maybe even a little bit cleaner, there's a version of this that Stephen Tucker published in Pabular, and I think that was also in 1994. I mean, I'll actually put down here exactly where it comes from, in which issue of Pabular, but I can't remember it offhand. But the important thing was that Stephen Tucker, his idea was to use a well-known coin gimmick to make the handling even cleaner. And so I thought that was really creative of Stephen Tucker. So some of you may like that even more just because the handling is a little bit cleaner. Personally, I don't have any issue with the original version of Control Coins, and that's the version that I probably use most frequently because I don't carry that gaff with me, so I'm usually not ready to go with that. So I would just recommend the original version, but some people may like an extra clean version, so I just mention it to you guys here so that way you know of it, and maybe you can profit from that. So that's my first notable mention for you. Moving along to the second notable mention, we have a couple of effects which are exactly the same, believe it or not. So the first one is called Ion Man from John Bannon, and that was put out on his DVD project. That actually wasn't a DVD project. Yeah, that was called, I think it was called Zero Move Volume 1. But you can also find it in his book called High Caliber. I think that's where it was, at least. And David Forrest's Positive Thinking, I think it's called. So it's funny because each of those effects are virtually exactly the same, but they're only separated by about 2 years. I think one came out in 2014, the other one came out in 2016, or something along those lines, where they came out only 2 years apart from each other, but they're virtually almost exactly the same effect, where you're using a business card and a coin. I think that they're fine, there's nothing wrong with them, but they do have one limitation where if there's a certain outcome, you really can't show the spectator everything. And so because of that, I think that there is a small limitation to it, and your spectator may be suspicious just because of the handling. So for that reason, it's not included in the top 5, but it's still perfectly workable, and probably a lot of people would like it a lot. So I mention it here as a notable mention. And then moving along to my third notable mention, we have a totally different way of presenting the effect. And this comes from a book called Effects with Business Cards by Gerard Zita. It was actually called Invisible Heads or Tails, and it's not really positive negative, but it's a way you could utilize the idea to perform positive, negative. And the reason why it's really clever is because after your spectator names the coin and names heads or tails, you're going to show them the card, and the card's going to look totally blank. And then you're going to be able to show them the prediction. You need something else to show them the prediction that it's been there, they just didn't see it. Very James Bond-like type of way of revealing the prediction. So some people may like that. There is some arts and crafts involved. You're going to have to buy some other things that you're going to need. Because it does use an element of like invisible ink and stuff like that. So if you're into that and this sounds like something you might like, you may want to check out that PDF, which I think you can also get that from library.com for like 40 bucks if you want to. It's really clever, and I've actually experimented with some other options that aren't even in that PDF using similar ideas. Again, there is preparation involved, and so because of that, it's not part of the top 5 for me. It's not something I'm going to be using regularly because it's just the preparation is just too much of a hassle for me. So I'm like more interested in stuff I can just do right off the cuff. But I just mention it here as a notable mention because to you, you may really like that. That may fit your persona and how you perform. So you may be like, oh yeah, I want to check that out. I want to try that out. So that's my third notable mention for you guys. So let's get into now my list of top 5 positive, negative effects. Now keep in mind that I've organized this in terms of completely impromptu to some preparation. So the first effect is going to be like you don't need anything but a coin, and then the last effect is going to be you're going to need to prepare an envelope. So that may take you like 5 minutes overall. But you are going to need scissors and some other stuff, so there is some preparation. So it's like plus or minus. But all of these effects are effects that I've used extensively, and all 5 of these are versions that I still use. And it's more about the situation when I'm going to use one over another. And I'll try to just touch on that briefly as we go through these. But these are not listed in order of like best to worst or worst to best. It's none of that. All 5 of these are excellent. Amazing. I would recommend any of these 5 to you. In fact, I'd even recommend the original version from Max Maven too. It's just as good, really. Although people will tell you there's that limitation that you apparently can't hand out the card half the time, but we're going to get into a way of fixing that here in a moment. You may like one version more than another, which is why I present these to you guys. And so that's pretty much what we're going to get into. So let's take a look at number 1 on the list. This is a completely impromptu version of positive negative, which is called Proof Positive. And that was by David Parr. That came out about 10 years ago now. I think about 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. I actually bought it for $5 back then. I think now you can get it for $10 from Penguin Magic. As I mentioned, all you need is a coin. The only limitation is the surface that you have to work on. There is no sleight of hand. It is very simple to perform, but you do need kind of a soft surface. And the way that it is done is the same way that you tell the spectator to imagine 3 coins. They're going to choose a coin, imagine that they flip it in the air, and then you can immediately show them that you predicted not only the coin, but exactly how it would land. Again, very powerful effect. I think it's definitely worth picking up. I've used it extensively over the past couple of years and had a lot of fun with it. Now that brings us to number 2. This is an effect from Scott Gwynn, which is called Assertive Positive Negative. You can pick this up from library.com. I think it's being sold for like $4 right now. And it's basically exactly the same effect as the original Max Maven Positive Negative. The only difference is really the presentation and the ending, because Scott has come up with a clever ending for this which justifies the business card, so that way you can always hand it out to your spectators. So the very so again, this is another version that uses no preparation, completely impromptu, because you can just walk up to your spectator, say, hey, you want to see something, and take out your business card, or somebody could ask you, hey, show me something. You can be like, okay, you got a business card on you, or you could just take out your own business card. You could say, I'm going to write something down here, and then you can do the exact same routine. As I mentioned, the only difference is the ending of the effect, which Scott has changed slightly to kind of justify the business card where now you can always hand it out. It's an excellent version of positive negative, and for probably a lot of people it would be your favorite version because you don't need to have anything on you. You can go right into it whenever you want to. All you have to do is have a business card or borrow somebody else's. So this is number 2 on my list of top 5 positive negative effects. All right, moving along to number 3, we actually have 2 effects here because they're both almost the same effect. So it was hard to choose one over the other, so I'm just going to include them both here. So for 3A, we're going to call this the effect that's called Equiv-OK by Richard Bush, and you can find this in his book called Peak Presentations. There's actually a whole chapter there on equivoke with imaginary coins, as well as doing an imaginary coin flip. So there's a lot of ideas there, but the same basic premise is the same as the other effect I'm going to talk about, where you're going to be using a card and a coin. There's a couple of other ideas. He gives you an idea of using a coin in an envelope as well, and it's all really clever. And I think that you're going to like it a lot just because of how you perform the effect and how you resolve the issue of whether they decide heads or tails. So very useful. I've had a lot of fun with it, utilizing it. I think that you're going to enjoy it too, which is why that's number 3 here. And then the second effect that I'm going to talk about, which is probably even just a little better than that one, is called Accentuate the Positive by Bryce Coolman. And this was found in the book called The Mystery School Book, which was published like 20 years ago by Eugene Berger and Jeff McBride. There was a section there where Bryce Coolman talks about how he performed positive negative, his handling of it. And the reason why I liked it so much was because the spectator is only ever really going to be aware of one out. The other out, they'll never even realize it even existed, which is great. And probably the most valuable aspect of it is the script. The script is pure gold. For me personally, it's the best script I've ever seen for presenting positive negative. And the reason is because it justifies what the spectator is doing. Because the issue that you may have with positive negative is this idea of, okay, pick up a coin with your left hand. Okay, now imagine picking up with your right hand. Now hand me one. You know, it kind of seems weird. Why are you doing this or that? And so the script is going to be, if you memorize that script, which is so simple, it's going to make sense why they're doing what they're doing. And the spectator is going to get a sensation that that's exactly what was intended the whole time. They're not going to get a feeling that they made a decision and now there's a bunch of multiple outs, you know, which is what you don't want. And I've seen some performances of mentalism where a spectator will make a choice and then the mentalist kind of like hesitates and, you know, kind of like, you know, fumbling along. Okay, well, all right, now pick up one with your other hand, you know, like you want the script to be like this because you want it to be that's exactly what you intended the whole time. But that's what I would tell you guys, that if you can get your hands on the book and check it out, then it is really worth it. Just for the script alone, it is just really worth it. So anyway, that's number 3 on my list. Again, those are just excellent versions of the effect. Moving along to number 4, we have an effect called Janus version 3 by Gerard Zita. Another effect that you can pick up, I think you can still get this from library.com, and I think it's $10. There is some preparation for this version, a little more than the other ones, but it does use a very well-known common principle in mentalism that we all know about. In fact, when you read it, you'll say, why didn't I think of that? You may even think, oh, really? Is this really worth $10? You may think that after you know the secret, but the truth of the matter is it will enable you to perform the effect squeaky clean, and with a very minor tweaking of the handling, then you can always hand out the business card as well. But it's really simple to perform. Again, it's going to take about 25-second preparation. You are going to need to have your business cards though to be able to perform it. So it is number 4 on my list because I've had a lot of success with it and I really like it a lot. The one thing I would tell you is that hopefully you will actually go out and use it, because I think that once you see the secret, you'll be like, oh God, really? I paid 10 bucks for that. But it really does work really well, and it really is sneaky. So that is number 4 on my list. And finally, moving to number 5 on my list for top positive negative effects. This is the one that requires the most amount of preparation, and this is the ultimate positive negative from John Sesta. And so this effect now is like well over 10 years old. You are going to have to prepare an envelope, and I don't like using like a larger envelope like this. I like using like a number 1 coin envelope, and I pretty much always have one of these prepared in almost all my wallets, because that's how useful this is. And so what I like to do is I just have it all set and ready to go, and this will enable you to be able to go through the routine, and you'll very cleanly be able to let them choose what they want to choose, and then you can show them that you predicted it ahead of time, and they're never going to ever see anything. You can leave them with the envelope. You can leave them with the prediction that's inside. It's absolutely diabolical, and it's just an excellent way of predicting things in general. But with this routine, it's like pure gold. And so I would urge you to check it out. As I said, the preparation of the envelope will be, I don't know, about 5 minutes of your time, maybe 4 minutes, but definitely worth it. And I like to just carry it around like, this is like a packet trick wallet, but I would carry it around in any wallet anyway. And I like this size because it's nice and small. So that's my list of top 5 positive negative effects. Now, if you think that I've missed something here that should belong on the list, just leave us a comment below. But otherwise, I hope that this has been really informative to you guys. And if you're not familiar with the positive negative effect, hopefully this has piqued your interest. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I'll see you on the next review.